what we've seen in the past 20 years is this trend of a lot of young people, let's say 15 years ago, like we were talking earlier, their aspirations were to be a doctor and engineer, right? The other aspiration was to work for multinational. And so now we see like a lot of young people graduating with either, have a lot of innovative ideas and they'd like to turn it into a startup, or you find a lot of young people graduating and wanting to work for a startup.
Hi, I'm Dina Yao, your host on the Emerging Markets Tech Startups podcast. While traveling to over 90 countries, I was inspired by the entrepreneurial spirit across startup communities in Africa, Latin America, Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. On the show, we bring you stories from entrepreneurs, startup ecosystem innovators, and investors. We discuss what makes these markets culturally and historically unique, local trends, local challenges consumers and founders face, and the opportunities. Let's get started. Today, I'm so psyched to be joined by Dina El Mofty. She is a wonder woman in the Egyptian startup ecosystem. She co-founded Injaz, which is an accelerator that has helped entrepreneurs in Egypt scale, grow, find funding, and also helping build the next generation of entrepreneurs through their programs in schools. Let's dive right in.
Hey, Dina, it is so great to reconnect with you. It's been 2 years. I think 2018 is when we met.
Such a pleasure, Diana. It's so great to reconnect with you after all these years.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. People are really curious about what's going on in the Egyptian startup ecosystem, and you're one of the key leaders there.
My journey with the ecosystem started in early 2003. An organization, Injaz, has a regional and a global presence as part of the Junior Achievement Worldwide Network, and Injaz Al Arab here in the MENA region as well. So basically what we do is we focus on promoting like an entrepreneurial culture at a very young age at schools and universities. And so when I founded Injaz in Egypt back in 2003, also helped pioneer the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Egypt, because we started very early on by supporting early stage startups and entrepreneurs, because we found that so many of those who graduated from our programs had such a keen interest to launch their businesses, but they just didn't know how to go about doing it and who to go to for support. And this is like
2003, even in Silicon Valley, 2003 was still kind of youngish, at least for these recent companies like Facebook, newish tech companies. So to have you start.
I had just recently graduated college, and I was recently married to my husband. I just had this very strong passion towards, making an impact. I was very passionate about education because I saw the discrepancy between, private education and public education. It was such a tremendous gap. The needs of the workplace and graduates that were graduating from college, and they didn't have the skill set. At that time, like early 2000, I was also newly pregnant, and I found out I was pregnant with my first daughter. So much was going on.
Right? You just had to add another thing on top.
Complicate the elements.
You totally challenged the concept that women can't have it all.
Can you imagine being young, female, and pregnant while setting up an organization in Egypt and having to deal with like registration and clearances and permits and licenses with like government officials and bureaucrats? That doesn't really work in your favor, that kind of profile, So they keep asking me like, where's your boss? Bring us someone older to speak to. Like in their mind, they couldn't fathom or process that I was the only person like in charge that they need to deal with, and there was no older boss.
So thank you so much for sharing that. And I know our audience is really curious about Egypt in general. So can you tell a bit about the ecosystem? And usually people want to understand, how big is this market? What are some consumer trends that are going on? What makes it unique versus the rest of the world?
Yes, absolutely. Maybe I'll take you through a macro perspective of the region, just to give you a perspective of the ecosystem in the Arab world in general. We're 22 Arab countries. We're like 1.5 times larger than like Europe cumulatively in terms of those countries put together. There's 4 sub-regions. You have the GCC, the Levant, North Africa. It's a cumulative population of 400 million people. 60% of those 400 million people are under the age of 30. And so you have, a very young population in this region. You have 70% internet penetration, over 50%, smartphone penetration, and one main language that unites them all, which is Arabic. So you have, very tech savvy young population with a high level per capita income and purchasing power, makes it a very lucrative place to do business.
Wow. Did you say the internet penetration is at 70% or 17?
Yes, 70%, over 70%.
That's definitely higher than some of the regions I'm seeing, and that probably leads to why I know the Middle East is also known for really talented developers, right? Especially in Egypt. I remember visiting there. Where does that come from? Is it just like a history of math and science?
Yes, I think it's maybe part of the education system, and culturally promoted like 2 professions. Like families would, encourage their kids to either become a doctor or an engineer. Like those were the most sought after prestigious professions, culturally speaking. And so that's possibly part of the reason why we have a lot of very talented engineers here.
And you shared some of these facts about the Arab market in itself and sort of painting it as one united region. Are you seeing that from how startups decide to go to market? So for example, the startups in Egypt, do they automatically?
What happens is that with a lot of the companies who will start up in Egypt, usually their goal would be to have like their back end kitchen operations here in Egypt, and they do their business development in the GCC. They'll gain greater revenues, gaining clients from the GCC, and while maintaining a lower cost operation based here in Egypt. So this is what we're seeing a big trend of companies doing, basing their operations here.
And what about Egypt itself? Like, how large is it? I know you mentioned the whole Arab world is 400 million, but Egypt is almost like 1/4 of that, right?
So we're 100 million people with like almost like 30%, if not 40, under the age of 30. Like what we've seen in the past 20 years is this trend of a lot of young people, let's say 15 years ago, like we were talking earlier, their aspirations were to be a doctor and engineer, right? The other aspiration was to work for multinational. And so now we see like a lot of young people graduating with either, have a lot of innovative ideas and they'd like to turn it into a startup, or you find a lot of young people graduating and wanting to work for a startup, not wanting to work for a big company anymore.
Yeah, when I went to visit Egypt a couple years ago, I felt the young people were just so empowered. And I wasn't sure if they all, caught the startup bug or had something to do with the revolution, where people felt that they didn't want to just stick to old systems and that startups.
Yeah. Definitely a shift happened early around 2011. I mean, you saw that political revolution happening, but also I thought there was economic shift happening in a newfound direction toward an interest in startups, where slowly the ecosystem started growing. So 10 years ago you wouldn't find the number of accelerators there are now, nor the amount of angel investors or VCs that there are now. So around 2010, 2011, 2012, we saw this growth in the startup ecosystem. When we found like there'd be a success story that would be highlighted, we'd find like so many young people getting inspired by them because they're relatable, they're almost their age, and they had this newfound success by channeling their innovative ideas into their startup, and they gained success. And so it became almost like a ripple effect where other young people wanted to replicate and got inspired.
And that's what we're seeing in the Bay Area. You have the Larry Pages, the Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerbergs get claim to fame. And then the next generation is like, yeah, I don't have to, go into banking or consulting and then move my way up. But these people started when they were like 25.
Yeah. They've really inspired the generation.
So who are the like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerbergs in Egypt?
There's so many. 3 maybe big ones regionally gained a significant, amount of success. Like the unicorn, the big exits that have happened have been Kareem, which was the ride-sharing app acquired by Uber, and it was acquired for 3.1 billion. When you see like a region that has a lot of challenges, with it come endless opportunity. The challenges in the areas of transportation brought about like some very interesting startups. So you have startups like Swvl, which is a bus sharing platform that has just really really boomed out of Egypt, and now they're expanding regionally and also into Africa as well. Another transportation successful startup is Highland, which is dominating. Other startup gaining traction, or those that are working in the e-commerce space. Another big acquisition that's happened was Suit.com, and it was acquired by Amazon for $600 million. Find a lot of these exits happening, which is super inspiring to see. Another one was Talabat out of Kuwait. They were a delivery service application. They got acquired by Rocket. That was another big exit in the region. Here locally in Egypt, based Forbes ranking, we have a startup called Instabug, which has had a lot of claim to fame, and they're a bug reporting app. And I believe they were also accelerated in Silicon Valley, but they're based out of Egypt. Another one is Wuzzuf. It's a job recruitment platform. They've helped over 60,000 people find jobs in over 4,000 companies. Another one in the health domain is a company like Visita. It's a real pioneering health platform that's now expanding regionally, not only in the MENA region, but into Africa. Another one is Eventus. It's a platform that hosts events, and they've had a lot of regional success as well. Like the list goes on. I can continue mentioning a few more, maybe from the innovative ones as well.
Yeah. Are there any pretty like technical ones? Because I'm also curious. You guys have really strong developers, and I remember when I was visiting, the young developers are talking about like machine learning, artificial intelligence, anything there?
With AI, I mean, there's Fernwish is one of them, and they're one of our startups led by a wonderful young lady, Rihem. And Rihem basically, led a team. They're basically like interior designers. Through their application called Fernwish, they're able to give you this kind of virtual experience of how your space would look, would select products from different kind of shops, and you're able to have this virtual feel of how it would look.
How many of these do you feel like, are solving local problems versus like, oh, I saw this model in another part of the world and it'd be great to just plop this into Egypt?
For example, let's say GoodSmart. GoodSmart's another good example, and they happen also to be one of the startups that we helped launch from our accelerator a few years. They came up with a concept, the easiest household online delivery experience, where they put an insulated box outside your apartment or your home, and they have the key to it, and you'll have the key to it. And basically, you order anything you want from your groceries, and they'll deliver it straight to your home, and you don't have to be home because you'll have a drop-off box. So that was something quite innovative as well.
And it seems funny enough, you guys are early in food delivery. My friend Omar always likes to joke that food delivery here took off maybe 5 years ago. He's like, they had been delivering McDonald's like 20 years ago in Egypt.
Yes, like 20 years ago, exactly. We're all about home delivery. We home deliver anything you can possibly imagine. So, like, hairdressers can come to your house. You can have your nails done at home. So everything like this home-based delivery has been a big thing.
It does seem to be a trend of this region of the world. I mean, one of the earliest food delivery startups started in 2001, Yemek Sepeti in Turkey, who at the time was delivering global brands like McDonald's, Pizza Hut, but also had local brands join the network. And they were started in 2001 before Grubhub was founded in 2004 and before Delivery Hero, which is one of the largest food delivery tech companies, founded in 2011. In Egypt or the Middle East,
Are there any other verticals that are very unique?
There's the renewable energy is really taking off right now because pollution is such a big issue here and a big challenge. We've had a lot of companies coming in with, there's been a surge in clean energy, waste management, renewable energy startups.
And is this stuff to do with solar, wind?
One of the startups that is making incredible progress right now is Solarize, for example, and it's all about promoting solar energy and promoting it even in households. So they'll go to not only commercial but also in your own home. Let's say you want to bring down your electricity bill down by like 70%, they'll help you do that.
How are the consumers reacting to all of this? Because there seems to be just so much innovation and people creating these different models, whether they be copycats or very unique to the ecosystem. But are people paying for these? Do they have money for it?
It's like you almost can't keep up with all the innovation that's happening. And like, to the younger generation, this is just the new way of life, right? It's the lifestyle. And like, this is something we've had to raise awareness to our parents' generation. Like, we're continuously informing them about it. You have services like a company like Elves, for example, that's like your own personal concierge. So they'll buy anything for you, run your errands, pay your bills, get anything you need right to your doorstep. So it's like almost making life easier for you in managing your day to day. So it's so great to see. Yeah, exactly, like a personal assistant.
So it seems like this is the way of life for young people up to maybe 30s.
Yeah, I'd say even till 40s.
Are a lot of these being supported by investors locally, or how are these startups kind of finding the funding?
There are a lot of more accelerators who are supporting these startups to scale and grow. A lot more angel investors coming in with different levels of investments, and then there's the VCs. But of course, nothing comes without its challenges. And despite there's a lot of big steps that have been taken, but yet you find that one of the components is that, like, a lot of those startups who will leave the accelerator still are in need of early stage funding. They just need, you know, more early stage investments where sometimes they can't get access to. And like, before they reach the Series A funding, I think there's a bit of a gap between angel funding and Series A funding. And so it's that valley of death, they call it. That's where the biggest challenge we see is still happening.
For these angel investors and VCs you're talking about that are investing in Egypt, are they local Egyptian organizations?
So with the angel groups, they're mainly Egyptians, I would say. They're predominantly, let's say, Egyptians, and there's a couple who
Are they sort of the rich net worth?
what backgrounds? Some would have like family offices. Others will be themselves entrepreneurs who are seeing opportunity, and many of them mentor other startups and coach them, and they see the opportunity there firsthand. And so they go in and they go in as angels. We're seeing angel groups forming here in Egypt as well. And like Cairo Angels is a big one, and Cairo Angels is forming like a regional angel group under the name of Main that's gathering more angel investors from the region who are interested to invest. And for the VCs, there are obviously some big local ones, but for the first time, the past 5 years, we've seen some major players coming in from abroad. Sawari, Algebra Ventures, there's Wamda, and some European ones.
So none from Silicon Valley? We don't have representation. Wow. That's surprising, especially like you said, given all the exits that had happened from.
Yeah. We're seeing more and more investors coming in from the US just recently.
And any coming from the, East? Because I know a lot of the Chinese companies or the Alibabas of the world, Tencents of the world.
Yeah, the Alibabas of the world have a big, major focus on Africa. Like the Alibaba Foundation, they work a lot with entrepreneurs in Africa.
Egypt is lucky to be part of the Middle East and Africa, so right?
And Africa, exactly.
I know we are running out of time, but I'm curious, is there anything else you wanted to share with the audience about the ecosystem to get folks excited?
So I found that one example that I found very inspiring is like the initiative that we do, speaking of Silicon Valley, with Silicon Valley. It's an exchange that we do every year that you're familiar with, where we bring in a group of like 10 to 14 growth stage entrepreneurs and take them on a trip to visit Silicon Valley. And this has been like a profound, eye-opening experience for so many of them. I mean, they got to get mentored, coached, and supported by so many brilliant and amazing people in your ecosystem. And so many have even come back and found they've had a long-term mentor who supports them from there. Some have actually connected with investors from Silicon Valley. One startup even hired their own CTO when we took them on the trip. It was just so amazing to see these kinds of exchanges happening, these kinds of connections. And really, these kinds of connections are priceless. I mean, even you and I, we that's how we first connected as well. And we're still in touch. And this is what's been happening with the startups that we took out to Silicon Valley over the past 5 years. It was this annual trip that we do, and I think more of that is needed. And even now in 2020, although we can't take them out there with everything that's happening with COVID, we've been able to bring Silicon Valley to them. And online, we've arranged, through TechWedi and through other partners in Silicon Valley to form these kinds of connections with startups here in Egypt, where they can gain more insights, get mentored, get coached by them, and possibly arrange investment opportunities as well.
And thanks for sharing that or reminding me of that, because I've actually heard this in a bunch of ecosystems where they say, oh, after they had that Silicon Valley trip, they changed their business model. Or like you said, they met someone who ended up being on their board of advisors. I guess I was able to host some of the folks from the Injaz group. And I remember the brilliance of the startup founders, so I'm not surprised that they were able to connect with investors and find the right mentors. Because really what you were doing was just bringing a great group of startups, just getting them exposed. And that is really just the first stage.
Exactly. Yes, that's what's needed. It really is.
Thank you so much for your work in doing that and being a champion and seeing this vision 17 years ago when it didn't exist yet.
No, thank you so much, Diana. Really, thank you to anyone who's interested in finding out more about the region, about the startup scene here. I have two books I would highly recommend. One is by Chris Schroeder, Startup Rising. The other is by Amir Higazi, Ecosystem Arabia. They have a wealth of information in both these books.
Thanks for joining us today on the Emerging Markets Tech Startup Show. If you have questions, comments, requests for me to cover an emerging market, or want to be connected with today's guest, leave me a comment in the reviews or find me on Twitter @DianaYao. Until next time,